Hi, and welcome to TLClocals' first heartspace class. Our heartspace program is a community education program bringing health, environmental, art, resource, and technology classes to the public, either for free or at a really affordable rate to reach people who wouldn't normally have access to those types of classes. So today we're going to start with our Fermented Food series, and we're going to learn to make sauerkraut. There's tons of benefits to fermented foods, providing and reestablishing probiotics in the body. So let's get started. So sauerkraut is one of the easiest foods that you can prepare, and both for money that you can save and the benefits of eating it, I highly encourage everyone to make it themselves. So you're going to start. We wouldn't normally make sauerkraut outside, but it's a beautiful day, so I thought for presentation purposes it would be a great option. This batch will probably just go to the dogs or the chickens. But you want to start with a medium-sized head of cabbage, just like this. Give it a good rinse off. Sauerkraut is one of those things that's very forgiving because you are wanting to populate the natural bacteria that are grown with this, but you do want to wash off any potential harmful bacteria like E. coli or salmonella. So we've given it a good rinse. Just to be even more cautious, I usually remove the outer layer, kind of set those aside. And then I actually will remove one additional layer and trying to keep it in a larger piece because we will go back and use this when we finish the sauerkraut. So that I'm just going to set aside in a clean place. When we're making sauerkraut, you want to be really mindful of the type of bowl that you use to create it. Your best bets are either a glass bowl, preferably this size, but a glass bowl like this, or a plastic bowl. The downside to plastic is it is porous, so it could have other bacteria in it, so you just want to be really careful. I actually use this one exclusively for making sauerkraut, so I know it's a good option, but glass is best. You could also use a wooden bowl, again a bigger size, but for demonstration. The wood is great because it does have natural antibacterial properties. The downside is it does absorb moisture. So a lot of what we're creating when we are making the sauerkraut is the moisture that's going to be what we use to ferment it. So you don't want to lose some of that to your bowl. One thing you don't want to use is a metal bowl. Metal and fermented foods do not go together. It actually impedes the fermentation process. So avoid a metal bowl when you're making sauerkraut. Avoid metal when you're making kombucha, yogurt. It's okay for the lids of the mason jars because it's not really touching your kraut. But yeah, you don't want to mix it in a metal bowl. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and get started. The way that I like to kind of attack the cabbage is first I cut off the bottom end. This one doesn't have much of an end on it. And again, I set that aside. These are great to throw in the compost, give to your chickens or your dogs. So now it's nice and flat. So now I'm going to cut it in half. And again, make sure you've got a sharp knife. Alright, so now you've got two halves. So again, I'm going to set it flat on my cutting board. And this time I'm just going to cut it into strips about the size that I prefer for my sauerkraut. So it will shrink up a little bit and it'll remain nice and crispy, but just kind of thin strips like that are perfect. And then as I cut them, I'm usually kind of throwing them in the bowl as I go to save space. And then I break them up a little bit. Sometimes I'll tear them in half for some of those longer pieces. Perfect. So we're going to go ahead and tear some more. You'll notice there still might be some of the ends in there. They're really kind of thick. I don't prefer those in my sauerkraut, so I usually just set them aside or throw them out. Alright, so let's do the other half. You want a bowl large enough that you can actually cut the whole cabbage in. And when I'm making sauerkraut, as far as fermenting it goes, I prefer like a 3.5 to 4 week ferment as far as flavor. So I actually will make a pretty large batch at once, maybe 2 or 3 cabbages. I have a lot of family and friends that love the sauerkraut, so when I can make larger batches, and it just kind of saves time down the road. And the nice thing about sauerkraut is it does last in the refrigerator at least 6 months before opening. And gosh, once we've opened it, I've gone a whole month before we've even finished a jar. And that's kind of safe side. We've actually opened a jar of sauerkraut that we've made a whole year after we made it, and it was absolutely fine. So, all right, almost done. Got some of those hard center pieces. I'm gonna, like I said, set those aside. Alright, so I have a nice full jar of cabbage now. So the next thing I'm going to do, and I'm going to bring this down a little bit so it's a little bit easier, is you're going to add salt, and I like caraway seeds for flavor. Some people do not love caraway, so they just leave it out altogether. I think it makes a really wonderful flavor for sauerkraut, so I highly recommend it. As far as any other flavorings that go in, a lot of people like carrots and different herbs in their sauerkraut. I would discourage you from putting those in at the beginning of the fermentation, especially if you're going to go that full 3.5 to 4 weeks like I like, and mainly because it's just going to overpower the whole flavor of the sauerkraut. So what I will usually do if I want carrots in my kraut is go ahead and let it ferment, and then before I put it in the fridge, that's when I'll add the carrots. And it's okay at that point to just mix it in a clean, sterile bowl and add the carrots and then put it back in the jar. So if you do that, though, I would eat that, you know, sooner than later because it's already been opened. So I've got my caraway seeds, and I prefer organic for all the ingredients, and definitely you want to buy an organic cabbage. You don't want to have pesticides in your sauerkraut, and same thing for anything else that you put in. So I'm going to go ahead, you do a tablespoon of each. Sauerkraut's the easiest to remember. It's just 1 to 1 to 1. So 1 medium-sized cabbage, 1 tablespoon of caraway seeds, and 1 tablespoon of salt. So when adding the salt, it's really important that you pay attention to the type of salt that you use. There are certain salts that will actually impede, again, the fermentation process. So my recommendation is Redmond's Real Salt. It's a really nice natural sea salt. It doesn't have any anti-caking agents in it. It's just 100% salt. It's a great option. Pink Himalayan salt is really good too. The downside to that is it's usually in crystals, so you'd actually have to grind it down before you add it to your sauerkraut. So if you don't mind doing that, then it's an awesome option as well. It's got really good flavor. What you don't want to use is any salts, even though there might be sea salts, like Morton's is a really popular one. You definitely don't want to use any salts that are iodized, and that's mainly just because the iodine, again, impedes that fermentation process. So no. And then you also want to be really careful to look for anti-caking agents in your salt. So any of those calcium silicates, basically if it doesn't just say 100% salt in it, then it's got anti-caking agents and you don't want to use it. All right, so now that we have, oh, I didn't put the salt in. Let's put that in. And one of the things I really love about making sauerkraut is that most of the krauts that you find in the store that are in a jar, especially if they're in the refrigerated section, they're actually cooked. So they don't really offer that probiotic benefit that you're trying to get from fermenting your food, and they're really soggy. If you make it yourself and ferment it, it's actually very crisp. It has a wonderful flavor. You can find, small batch sauerkrauts in the stores now, and sometimes they're upwards of like $10 a container. So it's really a benefit to make it yourself, because if you think about the cost of a head of cabbage and we only use a tablespoon of caraway, usually I get 10 tablespoons out of a jar of caraway. So one cabbage usually does 2 to 3 pint-sized mason jars. That goes a really long way. So you're kind of paying pennies on the dollar to make sauerkraut yourself. And then the same thing with the salt. Like, how long is this going to last when you're only spooning a tablespoon at a time? So now I've got it all in there. You can see the salt and the caraway. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to work the cabbage and work the salt in. The salt is actually going to draw all the liquid out of the cabbage, and that is going to be the liquid medium that my cabbage is fermenting in. So you just literally crush it, kind of squish it and flip it and squish it, and you're going to do this for about 5 minutes. It's going to take that long to really get all the liquid out of your cabbage. So while I'm doing this, I can talk about a couple of other items of importance. One is the jars that you use. You do want to sterilize any jars. Kind of some good options, again, are these little pint-sized mason jars. You can also use like old salsa jars. Just make sure you remove the label first and then ferment it. You can see kind of that's a really good size there. And to sterilize them, I usually just boil them for 3 to 5 minutes and then use my jar tongs to get them out. Makes it a little bit easier. It's really important that you make sure that the jars have completely cooled to room temperature before you load them. Because one of the things that will also impede your fermentation process is if you killed all the bacteria before you started. So bacteria is obviously very sensitive to temperature and enzymes, so make sure those are completely cool. So just a few of the benefits of sauerkraut. As I was saying, it helps kind of replenish and maintain a balance of the probiotics that are naturally in your digestive tract. Anytime that you take antibiotics, it not only kills the bad bacteria, but the good ones as well. So it's really great to make sure that you are utilizing probiotics either during your antibiotic regimen or after to replenish that natural probiotic balance. Another thing about fermented foods is they're actually partially digested, so it's a lot easier for you to digest those foods. It also makes nutrients more bioavailable. So there's a lot of benefits. Kind of my two staples are sauerkraut and kombucha. I have a continuous kombucha brew, and that is one of the classes we will be doing in the future. So I'll probably fast forward through part of this because, like I said, it does take a full 5 minutes. So I will see you on the other side. And a couple things I haven't asked before, because I said no metal. Well, what about your metal knife and your metal spoon for measuring? That's okay, as long as it's not touching the fermented portion. So once it's in the bowl and I'm squeezing everything, it's actually starting that process. So you don't want to leach any of the materials out of the metal. It's a workout for sure. Reminds me of those hand things that you exercise your hands with. All you have to do is make kraut. Alright, so I'll try to zoom in here. You can see how much liquid is being produced just by squishing that sauerkraut. Probably another minute or so and then we'll be ready to go. Alright, so you can see our bowl of kraut. There's quite a so the next thing, let me wipe my hands off a little bit. So the next thing I'm going to do is actually load my jars. So again, these are completely cooled. They have been sterilized in boiling water. So like I said, one medium head of cabbage will fill about 2 of these, maybe 2.5, depending on how tightly packed they are. You do want to pack them tightly because you don't want air in there because the air can cause mold. So I'm just going to start loading them. I actually recommend wide mouth jars when you can. It's just a little bit easier to pack them, but once they're full enough and you can squish down, these smaller mouth ones are fine too. So I'm just kind of packing it in there. And you'll notice the more I squeeze it down, that liquid is now coming to the top. Alright, so I'm getting really close here. So I've got my jar. What you want to do for this size or a wide mouth is leave about an inch, 1.5 inches from the top. And the main reason for that is as it's fermenting, it's going to produce gas. So you don't want to explode your jar. The nice thing about using mason jar lids is that they do have a little bit of ability for air to escape. So you might see bubbles coming out while it's fermenting. You can also, what I call, burp the baby. So if after, a week or so you can feel the top is kind of doming and it seems like there's a lot of pressure, just kind of quickly release, you'll hear it, and then just close it back up again, and that's fine. So you can see that it's about 1 inch, 1.5 inches. You do want all of the cabbage covered with the liquid in this process. So I'm going to actually pour a little bit more of my liquid in here. So now you can see it's all into the liquid, maybe even a little bit more. And then what I like to do, because the cabbage wants to float, is that's why I pulled this leaf off in the beginning. I'll actually take that large leaf and I will tuck it all the way in and kind of squish it around the edges. So this trick kind of does 2 things. One, it keeps that cabbage underneath the water, right, because you've got it jammed in there really good. But the other thing it does is, on the off chance that you do get mold, and that would just be because you've got part of the cabbage out of the water, it'll just kind of keep it down. So if any part was to mold, it's just going to be that top leaf, because this water will be absorbed. And you can just take it out and throw it away and your cabbage will still be fine. I've been making sauerkraut for years. I've never had any mold before, with and without the protective leaf, but I just like to do it for one more barrier, and like I said, it does help keep everything down. So as you can see, there's probably another like 1/2 inch above, so it's like right below the rim is where that liquid is. So now I'm going to go ahead and cap it, and that'll provide enough room for that sauerkraut to ferment and produce that gas, those gas bubbles. Like I said, especially when it's warmer in the house, you might need to check it and just burp it. And then you want to keep the sauerkraut in a cool, warm place. So usually on top of the refrigerator is a great option, kind of at the back. You don't want it in direct sunlight. And then I let it go 3.5 to 4 weeks. I think that's kind of the perfect flavor. If you like a little more mild sauerkraut, maybe around the 2-week mark, you can lift up that large leaf and kind of take a clean fork and and taste it. And if it's to your liking, go ahead and put it in the fridge, and it'll stop fermenting and it'll be ready for you to eat. But again, like if you like it a little bit more sour like I do, that 3.5 to 4 week mark is perfect. I think that's it. One more point I wanted to make is that if you don't have enough liquid in the bowl, especially when you're doing that second jar, it is okay to add liquid to it. You just want to make sure that it's filtered water. You don't want to add anything from your tap in case there are metals in your water or bacteria that might be harmful. So just make sure that you're using a filtered water to kind of top off that last portion if you need to. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at aloha@tlclocals.org, and check out our YouTube channel for more upcoming videos on our heartspace program. We will continue our fermented food series with kombucha, yogurt, hard ciders, and apple cider vinegar over the next 4 to 5 months. And then we'll have other programs as well on environment, art, resource, and technology. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy your sauerkraut. And great. If you enjoyed this video, please like us and follow our YouTube channel. Be sure to check out our website, TLClocals.org, and follow us on Instagram. All right, and thank you for watching.